Azera.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
President Keeler. Here. Mayor Kearns.
Here.
Director Dvorsky.
Here.
Director Kazam. Here. Director Miller. Here. All in person.
Thank you. Moving on, we have comments from visitors. I have one for Mr. Steve Reynolds. Can you please come to the podium? State your name, address, please.
Good evening, Steve Reynolds, 1070 Virginia Avenue, Grandview Heights, 43212. Can you hear me okay with the mask?
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. So the legislation which Council has before it this evening in regards to Fairview Avenue is essentially a continuation of a legislative process which started in approximately 2019. For those of you who were not present 2 years ago when all of this began, please allow me to provide my perspective on the process. In 2019, the prior administration started the ball rolling on the idea that Fairview Avenue should be reopened to through traffic between 1st Avenue and 3rd Avenue. Here's how the strategy played out. The mayor goes to the Planning Commission and tells them the administration is in favor of reopening Fairview, quote, to reconnect the grid, a concept which apparently is akin to catnip for at least some urban planners. Not only is the administration in favor of reopening Fairview, but City Council's Civic Places and Spaces Plan even recommends reconnection. As we'll discuss this more in a minute, the Spaces and Places Plan did not make any recommendation regarding reconnection, nor should it have, since it was essentially a civic facilities master plan. The Spaces and Places Plan did, however, recommend reinforcing and enhancing Oakland Avenue and Fairview Avenue between 5th and Merritt as key pedestrian connectors. I was really hoping to learn at some point how it is that through traffic and more traffic could accomplish that goal, but I digress. The administration asked the Planning Commission to give tentative approval to the idea of reopening the street, which Planning Commission did. I'm not here to bash the Commission. They routinely rely upon the information provided to them by the administration and take it at face value. There's no reason for them to do any fact-checking or independent investigation. So, okay, next, you meet with residents on Fairview and Oakland to tell them that the administration is in favor of reconnecting Fairview Avenue. You tell them the Council's Spaces and Places Plan includes a recommendation to reopen the street, which, as I mentioned, it does not. And you let the residents know that the Planning Commission is in favor of reconnecting too. What could possibly make a resident feel like it's a done deal at that point? Then you introduce Resolution 11-2019, which was co-sponsored by the previous mayor and now current mayor, then council president, to gain City Council's commitment to the project. You tell council that the administration is all for reopening Fairview and that Planning Commission has approved the concept. You even tell them that you met with residents and they're all for it. In the resolution that you submitted, you again make the claim that the Spaces and Places Plan includes a recommendation to reconnect Fairview, an assertion the administration had also made in 2 separate committee meetings on that matter. Additionally, you state that the schools are in favor of the reconnection idea. Thankfully, council took the time to study the resolution and made several amendments. These included correcting the falsehood the Spaces and Places recommended reconnecting the street, since obviously the plan did not say that. Council also removed from the resolution the representation that the schools were in favor of reopening Fairview. As it turns out, School District President Truitt's statement to the P&A Committee was that the board did not have an official position on the extension of Fairview. Council made several additional changes to the resolution, seemingly to make it clear that both options, reconnection or leaving it stubbed off, needed further study and discussion. And council passed the amended resolution. Fast forward to 2021, the now new administration starts the ball rolling again. They hire a very well-qualified director of planning and community development to spearhead the project. They also engage the city engineer to assist in drawing up plans. Sadly, only the reconnection proposal is thoroughly pursued, and only a select group of residents is made aware of the process. The administration again approaches Planning Commission to seek its approval. Unfortunately, the administration also, once again, reverts to using false and misleading information in its presentation to the Commission. For example, the false claim from, once again, the Spaces and Places Plan that was repeated on June 16th in the Planning Commission meeting, June 16th of this year. When yours truly pointed out the incorrect statement, there was no retraction. There were, however, multiple references made to how everyone living near the schools was in favor of the reconnection plan. At that meeting, I voiced my concerns about the less than ideal process the previous and current administrations had followed and were following to push through the reconnection plan. I stated to the Commission that I didn't have a horse in the race and that sufficient information was not provided on either alternative so as to be able to make a well-informed decision. Maybe reconnection is a good idea, maybe it isn't. But the fact that the city had not pursued a transparent and open process by which all Grandview residents could weigh the alternatives was very troubling to me. One of the commissioners asked me an excellent question. If there are residents who are unhappy with the reconnection plan, why are they not present at this meeting? The best answer I had at that time was that only residents in proximity to the schools were likely to have had any idea that that was the topic on Planning Commission's agenda that evening. Upon further investigation following the meeting, I found a far more plausible and far more troubling answer to the Commissioner's question. It just doesn't matter what I say. The city will do what it wants. I can't imagine hearing a more disheartening phrase from residents of our community, although I heard it time and again from property owners adjacent to Grandview's 4 through 12 campus. It just doesn't matter what I say. The city will do what it wants. I must admit, despite literally decades of railing against such comments, I now find myself wondering if that is indeed the new reality. Is the city so hell-bent on reconnecting the street that it would ramrod through legislation to approve and fund the project? That's a far cry from any best practices model. It discards transparency, it discourages feedback, it disenfranchises residents. Tonight, I urge Council to insist upon a full, fair, and transparent vetting of the available options regarding the reconfiguration or configuration of Fairview Avenue so that we can all be confident that the final decision is indeed the safest option. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, we will move old business item 1 to the end of the old business so that it can be a part of a fuller discussion with the new business items number 1 and 2. And we will move to old business item number 2.
Ordinance 2021-16, an ordinance to amend section 937.05 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Grandview Heights to require owners of construction sites of 1 acre or more to adhere to best management practices for storm drainage facilities.
Thank you. Chair Hutchinson.
Yes, our committee met this evening and had a lovely presentation on the subject matter. This is codifying some practices we've already been doing and to bring things online and update with Ohio EPA requirements. And the committee recommends approval.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Edwards?
Yes.
Hasty?
Yep.
Katsipatinos?
Yes.
Houston?
Yes.
Panzera?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
President Keeler?
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-16 has been approved.
Thank you. Old business item number 3.
Ordinance 2021-17, an ordinance accepting the Ohio Department of Public Safety Training and Equipment Grant to advance monies from the general fund to the Fire EMS Grant Fund for the purchase of training and equipment.
Thank you. This was not assigned. Is there any discussion? Or is there a motion?
Move to approve.
motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Hasty,
Yep.
Hexapatinos,
Yes.
Houston,
Yes.
Panzera,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Edwards,
Yes.
President Keeler.
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-16 has been, 17 has been approved. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Moving on to old business, item number 4.
Ordinance 2021-18, an ordinance approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances as parts of the various component codes of the codified ordinances of the city of Grandview Heights, Ohio.
Thank you. Chair Hess-Christina.
Yes, we met. This is a legislative housekeeping issue. Director Kazam informed us that she and Clerk Napier are now twice a year going through legislation, making sure that tables are updated and things are updated in the printed publications. This is the iteration of that from the committee moves to recommend.
Can I ask the clarifying question? I just, in reviewing this, I noted both times that we just have the numbers. Is that common that we don't get the actual language for review?
The
Is that
numbers
typical for us?
Well, I don't know if it's typical. I think we've been trying to just be expeditious about it. These are all the ordinances and resolutions that are identified on the website and in the agendas. I think were they the only ones that we had, and I'm not remembering all of them off the top of my head. I remember the 2020-08 was the short-term rental one, but the other ones are not coming to me off the top of my head. I can go back and look at them for you.
Okay, maybe just for future, if, I don't know what amount of paper we're talking about, but it might be helpful for jogging memory to see the
title.
the language
Yeah, at least
included, or the title, yeah, so we can recall what, I mean,
Yeah, I can look them up for you right now if you like. The traffic ones and the criminal ones are not, they're statewide. There's nothing that we do with those. But let me, if you want to maybe just skip to the next one and just come back, I can look
Yes,
this up.
we'll move to old business item number 5 and come back. Old business number 5, please.
Ordinance 2021-19, an ordinance to accept the dedication of 0.086 acres of real property to create sidewalk easements and of 0.058 acres of real property to be incorporated into the public rights-of-way for public roadway at a development site at Grandview Avenue and Dublin Road, and declaring it an emergency.
Thank you. Chair Hess-Christina, your committee again.
Yes, these are for sidewalks and a dedicated turn lane related to the Sheets project. There is not enough private property there to build the sidewalk, so they've dedicated, or there wasn't quite enough for us to do sidewalks on our own, so we're taking an easement from them to make sure that there's full sidewalks and a dedicated turn lane.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Hexapatinos.
Yes.
Houston,
yes.
Panzera,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Edwards,
Yes.
Hasty,
Yep.
President Keeler.
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-19 has been approved.
Thank you.
I've got them actually. One second, this one more. So the first one, -02, is when we hired our strategy and community outreach officer. Second one, 08, is the short-term rental. 2012, or 2020-12 is amending the peddlers and solicitors bill. 19 is the mandatory display of license plates. And 2020-24 is amending section 143, planning and community development director detention. And, yep, that's it. There were no other amendments.
Are there any other questions? Right. Moving back to the old business item number 4, is there any other questions or discussion? Is there any motions?
Move to approve.
Second.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Houston, Easton,
Yes.
Panzera,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Edwards,
Yes.
Hasty,
Yep.
Patsapatinos,
Yes.
President Keeler.
Yes.
Ordinance 2021-18 has been approved.
Thank you. Moving on to old business item number 1.
Resolution 18-2021, a resolution authorizing the City of Grandview Heights to seek financial assistance from Ohio Public Works Commission, OPWC, to fund the Bobcat Way transformation of Fairview Avenue capital infrastructure project.
Thank you. Director Holger, would you like to talk about both this resolution and the next two, or Director Miller, since they're all related?
Certainly. We are at the end of a long process here, working with the schools and with the community to figure out a way to dovetail city required infrastructure upgrades and with the school's major upgrade, and are ready to bring forward final memorandum with regard to that. The OPWC grant in particular, we will be applying to fund that entire upgrade that's proposed for reconnecting Fairview through OPWC funds. We've also applied for some other funds, so we're going to wait and see what ultimately happens. We're kind of trying to double cover right now to see what we might actually get. But the OPWC grant goes in September and requires a support from council to just apply for grant, showing that you and the community supports the proposed infrastructure improvement itself, and specifically then also the grant application to pay for that. So specifically, the OPWC resolution is with regard to supporting the grant application. The other two, should I continue? Or did you want to read those?
Yeah, we'll record the old business item number 1 as the second reading. And then clerk would go ahead and read new business item number 1.
Resolution 20-21, a resolution to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the Grandview Heights City School District to facilitate transfers of land between the City of Grandview Heights and the district to be converted and redeveloped as city right-of-way and parkland, as well as centralized parking and related improved infrastructure for the district's new 4 through 12 campus.
You'd like to?
So the MOU really memorializes all of the work that we put into planning with the schools collaboratively over the past, pretty much since I took this position in January. It really was studied extensively by our safety services forces, both chiefs looking at how they could best provide safety services to the campus. I would actually say that that general idea is very well supported in Spaces and Places, and also through subsequent planning efforts that we went through and the schools had gone through. Both chiefs recommend the configuration that was ultimately decided upon, and the schools and the city have negotiated how that all can happen. Pretty unusual opportunity to be able to get additional city parkland arises really because of the reconfiguration of the schools, which leaves a little piece of land kind of available. It is in a location that is supported by Spaces and Places. That's kind of a community nexus, kind of between the library and the schools, and so it's a great location for the city to also have a piece of real estate that potentially could house certain kinds of functions going forward. And so the MOU overall, again, sets out the conditions under which the schools and the city will partner to get all this reconfiguration to happen, to get the road to go through, to get the park finished, to get the parking consolidated for the schools, and just kind of lays out the roadmap about what the relationship will be to get all of those things finalized.
Yeah. And my understanding that this was passed with the school board, correct?
I'm sorry?
It's my understanding that the MOU was passed by the school board.
It was passed by the school board, yes.
Mayor Kearns, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Sure, if I may, I first want to introduce Yaz Ashrawi, who you all know, but reintroduce him to you as our attorney, our outside counsel on this matter. Because Breaker represents the schools, we retained Yaz to advise on this, and I've asked him to be present. So I don't know what questions you may have for him, but at this point, I would just like to kind of give a bit of an overview here as well. You know, we have a healthy partnership with the schools. This is a very small town. It's extremely important that we work in concert with them. This is the most important project that has been done in our community for decades. And the administration works daily with them on the project. Going back several years, several of you and others were directly involved in getting the project off the ground with the schools and supporting it in terms of bringing dollars to the table or compensation package agreement, so compensation agreement, and really enabling that to happen and getting tax relief to voters in the process. So this I view as a tremendous, tremendous partnership that is, as Director Kelper said, unique, and I think we should embrace it. The partnership continues. The agreement described benefits the city and its residents in several ways. It really, from our planning and strategic implementation perspective, it really brings a new park online, which of course, you know, no easy lift in a town of 1.3 miles. But it also accomplishes, advances the goals of our spaces and places vision in that it brings that park online in a place that is identified as an important hub, and anyone who, you know, drives by, walks by, has their kids at the school, understands is really a buzzing center of activity during the school year with the library right across the street. So it really connects that hub. It also improves the infrastructure. That's always a goal of the city. It needs to function. The site gets changed, the conditions change, the infrastructure needs to function better. And that is another goal that we have in any day of the week. I mean, we always have that goal. Improving safety, as described. This plan was embraced very strongly by the safety chiefs as well as engineering. And I will also mention that 2 of those 3 are brand new people to the table and had really not looked at it in detail. One of them wasn't even with the city. The other thing it accomplishes is to make the school site the best it can be in terms of its functionality. And they want to consolidate their parking into one lot north of what is now the annex, soon to be their parking lot. And that makes it work for them. That allows them to take their other 2 parking lots offline, consolidate it there. So it really is a win-win-win for both parties. A lot of work went into this. It's a complex matter. We have many meetings weekly for several months, and a lot of internal meetings to ensure that we understood the safety services opinions, and then we had external meetings. A lot of work went into this. It's very complicated. The financing is complicated, as you know. And so I really want to thank staff, starting with Director Kelker, thank finance for assisting with the strategy to bring some grants, hopefully, to the table. There's at least 2 grants in the pot now, probably more. And we don't necessarily get them all, but this is what we do. We try to find ways to make things happen, and that's what we're doing, and we have a good finance strategy for this. I want to thank the council president, the facilities chair, Mr. Panzera, for coming to the table for parts of this process, certainly with the school. There were board members involved, the superintendent, their construction team, who we at this point know very well, other staff members, not only safety, but service, and legal team, Yaz and Joelle. And so thank you very much for making this all happen to the point where we can bring it before you. I circulated to you I think it's actually still in draft form, but it's probably close to final of the process. And this illustrates the complexity of this. It's a legislative package, as I mentioned last time. There are several pieces. One started off earlier, but we were trying to catch them all up to be roughly contemporaneous. As far as the transaction goes, this lays out kind of the process. We're adding another public hearing for President Keeler to get on the agenda because OPWC requires that. But really, kind of the conceptual points of the transaction, and this is, Yaz can speak further on this if needed. The city would take ownership of the right-of-way and the parking lot, soon to be a park, that would occur this year. The city would give a contribution to the school, which allows the school to then finish their parking lot. And that's perhaps a little oversimplified, but that's sufficient to consolidate their parking lot. Time's of the essence because the OPWC grant deadline is September 13th. The school has in fact already approved the MOU, and this all played out last week, so I sent it to you today. I believe we even have a signed copy for you from the school's end, but it was very much being discussed up until the last minute. So we have the legislation, we have planning commission, which there's been two preliminaries. There will be a final this week on Wednesday. We have a plat coming, we have the grant application, land transfer, there has to be a lease back, and then there's a rezoning that's got to occur, and then it's all got to occur, again, as Director Helger mentioned, in dovetail with the school's ongoing project, which is logistically challenging. We have a timeline, it may have to be adjusted, but that requires quick action. So we have it before you, we respectfully submit it to you. I should mention that the administration does not believe that an executive session is warranted. I asked the lawyer to come speak in open session since we are at the very end here, and it's essentially been public for over a week. So thank you.
Thank you. A lot of information. Can I ask a clarifying question? You may ask a clarifying question. So I'm a little behind on viewing the planning commission meetings on YouTube. So there has been review twice, I thought I heard you say, but then they haven't. I'm confused as to whether they made a final recommendation from the remarks I've heard today.
I will describe my just generally, and if Director Kelber needs to correct me, she will. There was a preliminary review probably 3 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago. I think it was in the summer, it may have been 3. But that was preliminary, and I think Director Kelber can explain more. I can visualize some of these drawings, but they were not final. The directive, I believe, by the Planning Commission was city and school, we see these opportunities here, go forth and get the best site you can together, have a joint plan. That was done in June, May or June. The school came before the Planning Commission with another preliminary review, so that means non-decisional. They're bringing information a lot further along, got some feedback, took that feedback back, and has incorporated some of it and is coming for a final review, final approval, final review, major site plan review on Wednesday.
Okay.
And the original preliminary, which was about 3 years ago, presented two site plans for the school. One was kind of maintaining access the way it is now to a parking lot that would have essentially sort of connected the one that is there today on Oakland and the one that's there today on First Avenue together by sort of doing an addition between them so that the parking would have been all in the front there. And the road did not go through on that version. And then the second version, which is pretty close to what the proposal is that is going forward to Planning Commission now, showing Fairview going through how it was going through. Wasn't clear one way, two ways, part one, part the other. We vetted that through engineering, but essentially at that original preliminary meeting, Planning Commission more or less discarded completely the first idea of maintaining all that parking and all the various different access points, and honed in pretty much immediately on the Fairview going through idea. And so that's kind of where I picked up and started working with the engineer and safety services to figure out actually how to get as close as we could to all the various things that were the feedback that was gleaned, including harkening back to when the schools were looking at various different iterations. There were 3, one showing the road going through, one partially going through, one not going through. And I feel like the solution that has been arrived at not only meets the criteria and recommendations of all of our safety and engineering professionals on staff, but also is pretty close to a hybrid between between two of the three presented ideas. So I feel like it fairly closely represents not only the desires of the community and the neighbors, but also responds to safety services, and has been vetted many, many times in public at this point.
I would also like to mention that it advances our general planning goals in this town of having a safe, walkable community, a beautiful community that's set up for walking. And, every time that this discussion was had, the discussion about where are the kids coming from? Well, some of them are being dropped off, but gosh, a lot of them are really coming to this school on foot or on bike. And this, I'm not to get too far in the history of the annex and what happened, and I personally don't know all that. I wasn't here at the time, but I think it's an opportunity, and that we looked at it as an opportunity and kind of proceeded accordingly to plan around a current reality that we have at that school, and foreseeable reality too.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from council at this time? All right, we will record resolution 2020-2021 as the first reading. We could pass it tonight, but I think given such a big decision, holding off until the next meeting in order to ask questions. If there's questions, we'll know the outcome of the planning commission at that point, and we'll have a nice full amount of information. Moving on to new business, item number 1, nothing ready. So if you could please read new business, item number 2.
Ordinance 2021-20, an ordinance to approve supplemental appropriations for the fulfillment of financial obligations contained within a memorandum of understanding with the Grandview Heights City School District to enable the district to consolidate parking and make land available to the city for eventual dedication as parkland, and declaring it an emergency.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything additional to add to this?
I'll mention, I believe I forwarded around, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I forwarded just an outline of kind of the dollar value of the transaction that, it was a concept at one point. There were construction estimates along the way those get refined to reflect realities that change. And so this reflects the school portion, the portion that would be transferred to the schools by the city. That's what this represents. There is another amount that represents the city's cost to improve the parking lot into at least a grass state, to transform it into a, beginning of a park before we would be able to program it and understand what it will be in the future, but at least to turn it into something that is in line with the park that we would then need to. So that, I guess I'll also mention that amount. The first amount is work that has to be done not at prevailing wage, because it is done by the school. It is based on an amount that the school will do to transform the parking lots. The second amount has to be done at prevailing wage because it is the city's property. So that's really just the difference there.
So school districts don't have to adhere to prevailing wages, municipalities do, okay.
They're not allowed to, as I understand it.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Thank you. Director Miller? Director of Finance? Do you have anything to add to this?
No, so basically what the mayor said, this $367,796 is money we will transfer to the school district this year. And then that second amount that the mayor talked about right now is estimated at $146,680. So that's what we will do to clear the land, turn it from a parking lot into a park, into a grass area. So those are the two amounts that the mayor was talking about. This is step 1.
Thank
Can I ask
you.
2 follow-up questions?
Yes.
Sorry, I mean, to cut you off. Killer. To the point of the say earlier, Mayor, that we will have a public hearing, we'll need to have another one for the OPWC, if I got that acronym right, for the purposes of that grant. May we have that before, is it possible for us to have that, to our former colleague's point, before we would pass this legislation? If we're looking to do that second reading, that would be, one of these, I believe, is a request to pass on second reading, so that would be like before the September.
The resolution does not need 3 readings in order to vote on it.
Right.
But we're doing a second reading of the resolution. The ordinance, correct me if I'm wrong, will get 3 readings and does not need to be passed before the grant
No,
deadline.
they request a suspension.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the other way
requesting
around.
suspension, the second reading.
For the ordinance. Okay.
Yeah.
The public hearing requires advance notice of publication, so.
Public hearing, what I understand from Director Hughes, doesn't, I believe doesn't have to be a council function per se. It is an informational meeting for the public, it's not really hearing. So where you would share what the plans are going to be and, take any input. So I think that can be accomplished before then. It's our intention to accomplish it before the end of this month. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. The second question, are we gonna, the prevailing wage issue is not very clear to me, and we've gotten a little bit of detail about that. I know we discussed it before. Is that something we're gonna be able to revisit, or is that just already decided?
This is not an optional thing. This is what the state law says. So we're just
So can you
following it.
clarify for me why, if we're doing the work, why it's separated into 2 different?
So
Okay,
the work
that's- I
that
don't
the city
understand.
is doing on
Okay.
land that will be owned by the city will be subject to the prevailing wage, meaning
Okay.
that those workers will receive a higher rate of pay by
Yeah.
contract. But the work that is being done on school-owned property, which would be the parking lot, is work that is exempted from or prohibited from being priced out at prevailing rates.
And if it's prohibited, not exempted?
Correct.
Okay, okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Do you want to add anything to that, yes?
No, that was all I was gonna say.
The state expressly requires anything that goes through the Ohio Schools Facilities Commission to be done at the lowest rate, and so prevailing wages is not permissible for school
Okay.
projects.
Okay, thank you.
If I may ask a question on the public hearing, what is the purpose of that? Is that because, is that the OPWC, in relation to the OPWC application, as I understood it?
Correct.
Can you just describe what the,
I don't know that I have a lot to say on it. I think it's just an opportunity. So these are all competitive loan and grant programs, and I think the state will just take input on, any thoughts that the local government may have in terms of whether this project is worthy. But I think we've already been.
It's not obligatory from what I understand. It's additive, supportive to the application.
You get points for doing certain activities, for having certain things in place. And by doing this, you are having a public meeting, you're getting public feedback. It just adds to the project and gets you more points on the grant application.
So another clarifying question to that end. Have we not had one public hearing? I know we've had meetings with the schools, meetings internally within the city, meetings with neighbors. Have we not had one public hearing specifically on this, to educate the community on this proposal to date that we could include in that application?
We have had, arguably, the planning commission hearing
Planning commission.
really kind of put the project out there for feedback, and there wasn't much public feedback at that point, but certainly the project was out there for that hearing. We've had 3 smaller meetings for properties adjacent to or nearby to the site. There hasn't been an open community meeting outside of the planning commission process yet.
And a lot of times with these OPWC hearings, it's done kind of after you have a plan, you kind of have, you've had some engineer involvement. So a lot of times, Pat would have them up at City Hall and the council chambers, and it felt a little bit more like an open house type thing. He'd have a board with a picture of this is what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
And if people were interested, they could come in and talk about it. It's kind of an OPWC specific item.
Right.
like it done specifically for their OPWC thing.
Right, the only that makes sense to me and to strengthen the application, the only downside being, I don't know, do you want to communicate to the public, the project with the understanding that there's not much room for comment that would affect change at this point, right? Because it's sort of through the planning commission process for the most part, while they still have to approve it, so I don't know if their intent is for it to be a public meeting where input can be taken and then applied, or if it's really just informative of the community. It'll be the latter.
Yes, I'd say just a couple things about that. And the first one with regard to the hearing timing, I mean, I'll take responsibility for not having done it yet, in the sense that I wasn't aware of this OPWC question, if you will. And so it was just brought up last week. I'm like, oh, okay, we'll do that as well. So that's my, naivete on that particular topic, really in part is why that hasn't happened, just to be frank. But with regard to the design of the street, I will say truly at this point, it's still a concept. The Planning Commission is approving a concept. We haven't started schematic design yet. Right? We've done a proof of concept that we can lay it out, and it can work this way, and functionally it's recommended. But with regard to specific aspects of the street, we haven't started designing it yet, and there's a lot of daylight between here and when the thing gets built, where people will still be able to have input and voice concerns about specific design attributes. And I would anticipate continued dialogue, frankly, with the neighbors. I know when other streets have been redesigned, there's been kind of continued dialogue through the design process. So we're not done yet. In a sense, we're just getting everybody to support moving forward so that we can start the design process, which will happen hopefully if everything else goes well. We'll be able to start yet this fall.
Thank you, that was very helpful.
You're welcome.
And I would just say from experience in other roads that we've worked on,
Yeah.
something may work on paper and in practicality doesn't, and the administration has always been great about going back and working with anyone who uses that area or lives in that area and tweaking it to make sure that it fits the intended needs.
Okay.
All right, anything else? Suddenly very quiet. We will record that as a first reading. I have no other business.
Is it going to,
Oh, sorry. Yes, we will assign that to finance.
I was wanting to work.
You said, how can I write some sort of meeting notes?
And the resolution, President Keeler, does that need assigned or?
Yeah, we'll assign that to planning and administration, and that way everybody gets more. All right, moving on to other business. I have none. Does anyone else have any? No. All right, moving on, comments from council members. I'll just start off with congratulations to the school on completion of the middle school, and best of luck to all the kids who get to, are going back to school tomorrow, and especially those kids who get to use the new facility. It's online, it's exciting. It's a lot of work by a lot of people, the whole community, so thank you to everyone who made that possible. Are there any other comments? Yes, Councilman.
This will be my third time, I know, so thank you for indulging me. I'll keep this short, but reminder, next week, August 26th, that's Thursday at 7 p.m. We have a really amazing event. We put a lot of time and energy into planning with the libraries, and a community member, I want to say her name out loud because she's done so much work on it, Sarah Mazada. It's the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, 100 years later, virtual event, and there's still space for registration, and that is through the library.
Any other comments? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned.
What time is the event? Oh, 7 p.m.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we